We're going to continue our learning on Avinu Malkeinu. You remember yesterday we saw the very long list that is in the Ashkenaz version. There are other geographic rites that have shorter versions of Avinu Malkeinu, but none is going to be as short as the one that we're going to look at today, which is the one that comes from the story of the writing of Avinu Malkeinu. And just to set the scene for this story, the story actually takes place having nothing to do with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but rather having to do with a drought, a fast that is in response to a drought, and how the rabbis dealt with drought. It tells us, it gives us instructions in Masechet Ta'anit, in the section of the Mishnah that talks about what you do when there's a drought, and there are basically two options. Option A is to have a fast, and there was a series of fasts that you would do on Monday and Thursday, all the way out for 13 fasts. So that's many weeks after when it was supposed to rain. So you're thinking like sort of late fall and winter, and that's sort of the one way to bring the rain coming. And the second way to bring the rain coming, if the fasts aren't working, are to do a special Amida, to do the regular weekday Amida, but to add inside the regular weekday Amida 6 additional blessings that are specifically oriented to bringing out the rain and to pleading for God's mercy to bring the rain. So that's the situation that we're going to pick up in, and who's meant to lead this special Amida. So that's what we're going to look at in the Mishnah, and just get a sense of who is meant to come down and lead the community in this special prayer. And then we're going to tell some stories about that, which is going to get to our prayer itself of Avinu Malkeinu. So let me share the screen here with you. So again, we're in Masechet Ta'anit, the second chapter. And they're talking about this prayer that we recite in a situation of drought when the fasts haven't worked, and this is the next way that we might bring the rain. So when they stood up to pray the Amida, they shall bring before the ark an elder, a zakein, an elder here not just in years but also sort of in leadership, like the zakeinim from the Torah, the elders who are the community leaders. So they should bring a zakein who is ragil, and yeshlo banim, who is experienced, and he has children, but his house is empty, ubeito rekam. So it's somebody who's really suffering here. It's somebody who's experiencing the drought, in the food shortage, and not able to feed the members of his family, so that his heart will be fully devoted to the Amida. And then they tell us the structure. He says before them 24 blessings, 18 that are recited every day. That's the normal Amida. Now it's 19, but 18 back in those days. And add to them 6 additional blessings, special for the fast. So that's the sort of legal background. And now what you get in Masechet Ta'anit is the stories of what happens when this didn't actually go well. That is to say, if plan A fails, the fast, that fails, and plan B, the prayer, the special Amida, that fails, then what happens? And that's when we're going to get our story of Avinu Malkeinu. So let's take a look at that. I'm scrolling on down to page 2. Okay, so we have 2 stories in quick succession in the first is Tanu Rabbanan, Maaseh. Here's a story with Rabbi Eliezer, Shegazar Shlosh Esrei Ta'aniyot Ala Tzibur, Velo Yardu Gishamim. So Rabbi Eliezer, we have occasion to look at him as a character in just a second. Rabbi Eliezer declared 13 fasts for the public, but the rain didn't come down. So he's trying plan A, and sort of Monday, Thursday, nothing is happening. The rain isn't happening. The drought is continuing, and the food insecurity is growing. And the plan that's sort of outlined in the law is not taking effect. So then we get the plot thickens. But Acharona, at the end, not exactly clear at the end of what, let's say at the end of the last of the 13 fasts, that's one way of reading it. At the end, Hitchilu hatzibur latzeit. The people were going out. They started to go out. Where were they? What were they going out of? Not totally clear, but you could imagine they were sort of gathered together, having a fast together. And when the fast ended at the end of the day, and there was still no rain, they started to leave. That's the sort of situation that they're in. Amar lahem, he says to them, have you set up, have you prepared graves for yourselves? So he says 3 words, not in the script. Have you prepared graves for yourselves? This impacts the people. Ga'u kol ha'am bibchia. Everybody starts to burst into tears. V'yardu geshamim. And that's when the rain fell. Okay? So there's something that Rabbi Eliezer does to trigger the people to cry, which triggers the rain, and the crisis is over. What we see here is sort of going off script. Rabbi Eliezer, it's not clear what's the emotional valence when he says, have you prepared graves for yourself? Was he being sort of mournful and doleful? Was he full of critique and harshness? What was the force behind that? Did he mean it literally, or was he sort of get ready to die? Was he critiquing them for their behavior? You haven't taken these fasts seriously. These are all possibilities. It's not totally clear. As you know, Talmudic stories are very thin on the details, so we can sort of fill them in. But whatever it is, that 3-word sentence causes the people to burst into crying. And the crying, and this is going to be an important sort of thing to note, the crying down below, the human reaction down below leads to the rain from above. So the tears that flow from the people, it sort of mirrors the rain that flows from above. Okay. So this is story number 1. And now in quick succession, we get the next story. And this is where Avinu Malkeinu is going to make its appearance. So Shuv, another story. And you can see the Talmud itself is connecting these 2 stories together. Shuv, another story. Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer, she'arad lifnei hateva, ve'amar esrim ve'arba brachot v'lo na'ana. So Rabbi Eliezer, Yored lifnei hateva, that's the rabbinic way of saying he leads the Amida. He goes down before the ark. And he recites the special Amida that the Mishnah spoke about, the 24 blessing Amida, the 18 plus the extra 6 for the fast day. So it's presumably another year. The fasts haven't worked. And now we're on to the special Amida. And that doesn't work either. He's not answered. So what's going to happen? So in this story, it's not that Rabbi Eliezer does anything after that, but rather you have another rabbi who shows up and sort of takes things into his own hands. Yarad Rabbi Akiva acharav. Rabbi Akiva comes down before the ark after Rabbi Eliezer and says, Ve'amar, and now we get our prayer. And now I'm going to read it without the brackets because the sentences in the brackets sort of crept in to the Talmud in later versions of manuscripts. But in the earlier manuscripts of the Talmud, you simply have the words that are not in the brackets. This is true, by the way, of a lot of liturgy in the Talmud, is that people copied the Talmud exactly except for the parts where the liturgy shows up. And then they're like, oh, I know how that goes. And then they put in their own version of what they say in their community. So liturgy is always a little bit suspect when you see it in the Talmud because the copyists like to update the liturgy. But let's just read it in its original form. Avinu Malkeinu ein lanu melech ela ata. Avinu Malkeinu rachem aleinu. V'yardu geshamim. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva says, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we have no king but you. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, have mercy on us. That's it. 2 lines of Avinu Malkeinu. Now it is repeating. It's Avinu Malkeinu. So there is some sort of litany or kernel of a litany that's here. But just note that Rabbi Akiva is really only saying 2 sentences, almost like the economy of words that we see above when Rabbi Eliezer says, have you prepared graves for yourselves? So Rabbi Akiva also is being sort of very brief. And the brief words cause the rain to come down. Now, we're going to get the coda to the story in just a second, which is, I think, an important aspect to it. But let's just note where we are right now. You have the regular Amida, the super long Amida, that's specially long for the fast day. It doesn't work. And now Rabbi Akiva steps in, says 2 sentences, and that works. Now, in some ways, this is part of how we might experience Avinu Malkeinu at during the high holidays, which is to say, we spend a lot of time on the Amida on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That's the thing that makes the prayers very long is the expansions to the Amida, the poetic expansions. We did Unetana Tokef last week. It's all the things that we're adding into the Amida. That's part of what's going to drive the length of the service. And then you get Avinu Malkeinu at the end, and a little bit it's sort of like, you know what? Maybe the Amida didn't work, even with all of our additions. Let's try something else. And then you've got this sort of originally spontaneous prayer that really does the trick. Now, of course, the irony is that not only did Avinu Malkeinu not become spontaneous, it became longer and longer and longer, although that maybe is an aspect of spontaneity. People felt free they could add additional lines to Avinu Malkeinu. But now it's obviously just another page in the Machzor. It's not a spontaneous prayer offered by the leader. Okay, now let's get the rest of the story here, because this is going to be important as we continue to explore this dynamic throughout the week. So after the rain comes, Havu Miranane Rabbanan, the rabbis shouted or complained. Now, it's not totally clear what they're complaining about, but let's presume, we're going to see based on the answer to what happens next, let's presume that they were complaining about Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, he did the Amida, nothing happened. Rabbi Akiva, he says these two sentences and the rain comes. So there seems to be some critique of Rabbi Eliezer that's being put into the mouths of the Rabbanan, whoever they are, the rabbis who are gathered. Now, as a result of this, Yatzta Batko ve'amra, a heavenly voice comes out and says, Lo mipnei shezeh gadol mizeh. It's not because this one is greater than that one. It's not because Rabbi Akiva is greater than Rabbi Eliezer. Ela shezeh ma'avir al midotav. Rather, this one, and we'll see from the context, that's going to be Rabbi Akiva. Rather, this one, Rabbi Akiva, is ma'avir al midotav. He passes over his, let's call it for now, negative attributes. He's willing to forgo some aspect of his character that is negative, called here midot. We often have a positive association with the word midot, like midah means an attribute, but from the context we're going to see, it's going to be a negative attribute. And this one, Rabbi Eliezer doesn't pass over his midot. He doesn't overcome the negative aspects of his character. Now, just to bring home the force of what happened here, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva have a deep relationship, and the relationship is one of teacher and student, right? Rabbi Eliezer is the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. So when you get the drama of what happened in this scene, it's not just that one rabbi failed at the prescribed solution, which was the 24 blessing Amida, and another rabbi came in and did something spontaneous and it worked, but rather the teacher, the Zaken, the one that you would expect was going to get the results, Rabbi Eliezer himself, he's the one who comes down and he is ineffective. And the sort of young Turk student, the one who you wouldn't expect, jumps up and in front of his teacher does something unexpected, spontaneous, and ultimately effective. And this, you could imagine if you're in the assembled crowd that you would be out with the old and in with the new. Forget Rabbi Eliezer. He's no longer the leader I want Rabbi Akiva. He gets results. And then the heavenly voice comes out and says, no, it's not that he's greater than him. It's not that Rabbi Akiva is greater than Rabbi Eliezer. Rather, he just has this aspect to him, which is he's ma'avir al midotav. Now, we saw the word over last week in Unetana Tokef. This is a critical word for high holidays, and as we'll see as we explore this further throughout the week, God is over al pesha. God passes over sin. Passing over is a positive thing that we want God and people to do, and Rabbi Akiva is embodying that attribute, whereas Rabbi Eliezer is not, and that's going to get the results of the rain to come down. So just as we take a look at this story, Avinu Malkeinu starts in a context that has nothing to do with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but is in a context of communal crisis. And it's a spontaneous prayer that's said by the student, the person you wouldn't expect to get the results. It's very brief, and it brings down the rain, and then it causes us to analyze what's the character trait behind the person who said it and got results. It's not just about the words, it's also about the person. We're going to return to that theme as we look at a parallel story to this story tomorrow in the Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud, and we're going to unpack this even further. So we'll see you tomorrow.